पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशाः शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good. And may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our heart. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmaheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on verse number 7. That's on page 267 of your books. Sarva bhutani kaunteya prakritim yanti mamikam kalpakshaye punastani kalpadau visrujamyaham. At the end of a cycle of all beings, O son of Kunti, attain my Prakriti. At the beginning of the next cycle, I again send them forth. In the earlier verse, Krishna said how through his divine Maya, all this world comes. Now he's describing in detail how that happens. The creation is not a one-time event in the Vedantic worldview. Everything is cyclical. Time is cyclical, so things come and go. So the movement is always in a circle. The same thing is true with regard to creation. The movement is from the subtle to the gross. So in the beginning, and of course it's described in different books in different ways, but the idea is in the beginning are this subtle matter in its very fine form. Then gradually, then those particles combine in some specific form, and the process that is sometimes called panchikaranam. We won't go into detail today. But these subtle particles of matter combine and become gross particles of matter. And then these gross particles combine in various configurations, and from which this whole material universe comes. So just as the coming into being of the world is from subtle to gross, the return journey is again gradually the gross goes back to subtle and then remains in that subtle form for a while and then comes forth again. So it's a second cycle begins. So that is how and that's how you can see that even the idea of rebirth, reincarnation, everything is cyclical. So we are born, we grow up, we go through the different stages of life, then a person dies, then is born again. The same is true with regard to the universe, and that's what Krishna is describing. At the end of a cycle, all beings attain to my Prakriti. Now, all of this movement, creation occurs through Prakriti. Prakriti is the divine nature, the Maya of God, through which all of this functions occurs. And so it's a little bit like also the human birth. So the baby in the beginning, right when the conception takes place, it's just a couple of cells together. Then they multiply, then they grow up, the baby is in the mother's womb, and then the birth takes place. And then the baby grows, and then of course, at some point, after living a whole span of life, when the person dies, this body, which had acquired some dimension then, again is reduced back to dust or ashes. And again, then the cycle begins. So same thing happens on the cosmic level as well. Verse 8. Prakritim swam avashtabhya visrujami punah punah bhutagrama mimam kritsnam avasham prakriter vashat. Presiding over my nature, Prakriti, I again and again send forth this entire aggregate of helpless beings according to their nature. So God presides over this function of Prakriti to set this universe into motion, to bring it into being, and then take it back to its cause again. Then bring it into being again, take it back into its cause again. At our level, if you see, in some ways something similar is happening. When you wake up in the morning, you may not see it that way, but you are kind of bringing this waking world into being. Where does this waking world disappear? When you fall asleep, all of this again becomes subtle, in a seed form remains within you. So you wake up in the morning, again you project it. Again you take it back. Again you project it. So this projection and then withdrawing back can be seen at various levels. And so the word presiding over my nature, that word presiding is important, as we shall see. I again and again send forth this entire aggregate of help. Now, why helpless beings? Helpless because we don't have it's a tricky, it's very not easy to put it into words. We have freedom and we don't have freedom at the same time. So let me first begin by saying where we don't have freedom. So when we say God creates this world, the problem with creation as a one-time event is this: if everything begins at some point and God creates everything and God loves all equally, then everything should be perfect. Everything should be identical. No one should suffer. And that's how it was. I mean, even if you see the biblical description of the world, the Garden of Eden, ideal place. Harmony, joy, no problem of any kind. And then, of course, we have the story about the eating of the apple from the forbidden tree, and then the whole trouble starts. Now, God is not considered responsible for that. It's because the disobedience of Adam and Eve. So we need to find a way to explain the difficulties and problems and suffering that we all experience. We cannot attribute it to God because God is all loving. So either we have to say, well, we have been disobedient to God in some way. Another way of putting the same idea is, we are reaping the results of our own actions. That's karma. So if we suffer, it's not because God is angry with me, it's just because I did something stupid. So when God creates this universe or projects this universe again and again, how does God decide? Say, the second cycle now is about to begin, or third cycle. How does God decide what is every person going to experience? God doesn't sit there arbitrarily deciding, okay, in this new cycle of creation, you guys are going to suffer, you guys are going to have good time. That's not done arbitrarily. And that is why avasham, helpless, because what we are going to experience when the world comes into being depends on our own karma. And that karma has already been done. So you cannot change what's already been done. So you are helpless as far as in what situation you are going to be born. I mean, it's like this, even now, right now. When we were born this time, I doubt any of us remember like we were ever given a choice. Oh, would you like to be born in this country or this country? Would you want to be born in this family or that? We didn't have any choice. Well, we were born somewhere, but no one seems to have consulted us about where we would want it to go. In that case, we are helpless. But we have freedom that once we are born, whatever actions we do, those are not done helplessly. At every point in life, we have the freedom to do or not to do, or to do it differently. And we make the choices, whether something should be done or not done, or done in this way or in that way. And because we make that choice, out of freedom, we have to take responsibility for its consequences. What we are experiencing now, the joy and sorrow, if it cannot be traced to any of our actions in this life, then that must have been due to last life. And last life, what's done is done. You can't do anything about it. You cannot undo what's done. But what you're going to do now or going to do in future, we have complete control over. And that's why our life is, you could say, a mixture of freedom to do or not do or make choices about the present and the future. But we are not free about changing the past. That's gone. You can't change it. Unless if you are in the Harry Potter world and you got this, what's that? The time wheel, or what, I don't forget what the term was, where you can go back in time and change things. Or like some of these sci-fi movies, you can go in future and change something. Unless you can do something like that, but that's still a fiction right now. The reality of our life is the present is under our control, and because the future depends on the present, the future is also under our control. What is not under our control anymore is the past, because the past is gone. That's the idea. And so that's what is meant by saying the aggregate of helpless being according to their nature, means according to their karma. So whatever happens, whatever we are experiencing in life now, good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, is not because God has done these things arbitrarily, not also because we are special favorites of God or like God hates us. God neither hates us nor God has any special favorites. God is
well, God is God because God loves all equally. If God also had favorites like you and I do, then there is not much difference between God and us. So God is different. That's the idea. Then the question would be, of course, that if God is doing all this stuff, creating this universe, withdrawing it back again, creating it again, then how can we say God is neutral? How can we say that God is not affected? Because every karma has a result of karma, and God is doing karma. He's producing this world, He's withdrawing it, He's producing it again. So why is God not a creature of karma, since God is doing all this work? That is answered in verse number 9. Nachamam tani karmani nibadhanti dhananjaya udasinavadasinam asaktam teshu karmasu. These acts of creation, etc., do not bind me, Arjuna, who remain unattached to them like one indifferent. Now, this is very important. We know, and we have seen this in earlier verses, that every action that we do, we get attached to it. We get attached to the action through the sense of doership, because everything that I do, I feel I am the one doing it. And my identifying with the work by being the agent of that work, I'm already attached to it. Then I'm attached to the result of work, since it always creates this anxiety within me. Will this work succeed or not succeed? Will it work or not work? Will I get the result or not result? Will I attain success or will I attain failure? So we are affected by the result of work as well. If it succeeds, I feel happy. If it fails, I feel miserable. So with work means attachment. Now, work done as yoga, karma yoga, is the way to do work and yet not get attached. So the question here is, God is doing not just little tiny bits of work like you and I do. He's doing massive work. He's like bringing the whole world into being, and the whole world is being withdrawn. And yet, God is not affected. These acts of creation, etc., do not bind me, Arjuna, who remain unattached to them like one indifferent. Udasin. The idea is, if we, like Krishna, can do all the work, in fact, do a lot more work than we are doing now, and yet not get attached to it, then we can be always free and joyful the way Krishna was. There is a well-known saying in the Ramayana attributed to Janaka, King Janaka, who was the father of Sita. So Janaka said, Mithilayam pradiptayam name dahyati kanchana. He was the king of a kingdom called Mithila. And so Janaka says, even if Mithila is on fire, that's nothing to me. Now, of course, we read about, who was that, Nero, playing on his fiddle when the kingdom burnt. Now, what Janaka is saying here is not that kind of a carelessness, like, I don't care what happens to people. That's not the idea. The idea is, as a king, and Janaka was known to be a very loving king who did so much for his people. But he did all of that because he was an enlightened being. He did all of that without getting attached. In other words, I will continue to do everything. I'll continue to carry out my duties and responsibilities of a king. But deep down I know, anything will happen. That's not me. We see that in the life of Krishna as well. We see, right in the scenario of the battlefield itself, You see this, just imagine in your mind thousands of soldiers on both sides, ready, raring to go to war. And the war begins. And Krishna is there as a charioteer, no weapons. He's right there in the middle of the battlefield and preaching this highest philosophy. It would be crazy to try. I mean, think about it this way. If you are studying the Gita, the Upanishads, let's say, you might not be able to concentrate so well if you go, say, right in the middle of Times Square, or right, say, take it to a ball game in Fenway when the game is going, and try to study the Gita there. It's not going to be easy. When people are yelling and there's such an interesting game going on in front of you, you're not going to be able to concentrate on, because the mind will automatically get attached to what's happening around. You cannot focus on it. Now think about Krishna. There is this battle going on, and he is there, the way he's described in the books, he's completely at peace, calm, smiling, and teaching this highest philosophy. What it shows is that it's relatively easy to study and meditate and do all this thing when everything is calm, no one's there to disturb you, there are no deadlines to be met. Even then people find it difficult, but it's relatively easy. But when there's all this chaos around you, there are deadlines to be met, and there is a bunch of things to be done, and everyone is screaming and shouting, and yet you can be there completely at peace. Doesn't mean you're shirking your work. You're doing everything that needs to be done, but you are completely at peace. Holy Mother, Sharda Devi, when you read her life, you see she was living in this tiny little room in Dakshineshwar. And Sri Ramakrishna's room, there'll be so many devotees and visitors coming constantly. And Sri Ramakrishna would send a word then to Holy Mother and say, well, so many people are there and they are going to stay for lunch or dinner. So there's how much of cooking had to be done, how much of work she had, and then we read she easily managed to do at least 100,000 japa every day, in spite of so much difficult circumstances and situation. So it's common for us to complain and say, oh, I'm just so busy, I don't have time to do all of these things. And what Krishna is saying here, that we can be very busy, but at the same time that we are doing all the work, we can still remain unattached. Our mind can remain centered on God, even when we are busy doing all the work. So right now, we have to separate out our work time and rest time, work time and meditation time, which is why, of course, we have the weekends. So weekdays I work, and weekends then I can relax. So work and rest, already, I mean, that's the system in which we live. Why do we look forward to a weekend? Because, well, I don't have to work that time. Why do I look forward to a vacation? I don't have to work that time. And of course, we have set times for meditation because, usually it's not when I'm busy, because then I won't be able to sit and meditate, which is fine. In the beginning, these things will remain separate. There'll be a time to work, there's a time for relaxation, there is a time for meditation. The ideal would be, at some point, these compartments that I have created, these borders should become porous. That I can be just living, working, carrying out all my duties and responsibilities in the spirit of Karma Yoga. So I am relaxing at the same time as I am working. And my mind is completely focused on God at that time as well. So you are doing your meditation, you are relaxing, and you are working all at the same time. And we can see that in that wonderful picture of Krishna right in the middle of the battlefield. And that's the ideal before us. And that's what he means by saying, I remain unattached to them like one indifferent. So unattached, indifferent, these words shouldn't make us think like he was not doing anything. In fact, it is these people who are unattached who do a lot more work than we do. Swami Vivekananda did not live even up to 40. He passed before he turned 40. Shankaracharya died at the age of 32. Jnaneshwara, the great saint in Maharashtra, he took a living samadhi at the age of 21. So when I was little, it was like, oh, Vivekananda lived for 40 years. It looked like a long time. And now I'm much older than when Vivekananda passed away. And then you suddenly realize, in such a short life, how much he accomplished. In fact, his public life was actually less than 10 years, just 9 years. And you see those 9 volumes of his works, which are really, although they are called complete works, it's not really the complete thing. I mean, there are a lot of lectures, talks, and conversations, they were not recorded. So you wonder, in such a short time, they did so much. You see all these great commentaries that Shankaracharya wrote way back. That's now like 1400 years ago, even before there were computers, just to have write down all these long commentaries. So these people did a lot of work, but they did this work without the ego that I am doing it. So without that attachment, and that made all the difference. He'll describe that in the next verse, number 10. Mayadhyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. Presided over by me, Prakriti brings forth the world of moving and unmoving things. For this reason, O son of Kunti, the world revolves. So the world comes and goes, all these great cosmic events that take place, everything happens due to this nature presided over by God. The word presided over is actually very important. Think about it this way. Let's take a rather simple example. Let's say a ceiling fan or a fan that you have. So now a fan is what, when a fan goes around, it gives air. So a lot of work is being done by the fan. Really the blades, that metallic blades shaped in a certain way, going around, they are doing all the work. But a fan, an electric fan, will not be able to work unless it has an electric power. So now, if you ask, who is doing that work? Who is giving you that air? You cannot really say electricity is giving you that air, because simply electricity, it doesn't give you any air. So you need the fan, right? But a fan by itself just can't do anything unless it is plugged into a power source. So in this example, you could say that electricity is presiding over the function of giving air, while the air itself is being given by the fan. It's a crude example, but that's more or less what's happening. So when we say God brings this world into being and God withdraws this, now God is himself not doing anything at all. God is just being there, just like electricity is just there. But it's the presence of that electricity which makes the fan move and do the work. It's the presence of God which makes the Prakriti do all the work. And that's what is meant by God presiding over it. Think about it this way. When you and I do work, who is really doing the work? All of the work that we do as human beings is done either by the body or the mind. It's either a physical work or a mental work. I mean, what else? Which other work? What other work do we do? It's either being done by the mind or the body. Now both the mind and the body are not conscious entities in themselves. The consciousness, the power which animates the body and mind, that's conscious, that's the Atman, that's the spirit. Now the spirit by itself does nothing, it's just there. It's equivalent to the electricity in that example. But it's that spirit, that pure consciousness, which animates the body and mind and gives them the ability to do all the work. And you are that spirit. You and I are that spirit. Understood in that sense, we have to ask, none of us does any work as well. I mean, what work do you do? If you are the spirit, you don't do anything. And yet, we feel, I do a lot of work. I feel I have duties, I have responsibilities. While the actual work is being done by the body or mind. So when I say I'm doing the work, I'm really saying I am this body and mind. No one really says I am this body. You rarely find anybody making a statement like that. So we are not saying I am the body, but when I'm saying I'm lifting this book, I'm really saying I'm this body. Because essentially, who is lifting this book? Well, these hands. Hands are a part of this body. And these hands are lifting this book. Why do I say I am lifting this book? Am I this hand? And that's the kind of question a Vedanta student will ask. So, even in our own case, each one of us, we are presiding over all the actions that are being done by our body and mind. The duties and the responsibilities that are there belong to the body and mind. You didn't have any duty or responsibility before this body came into being. I mean, did you have any duties or responsibilities before you were born? You don't have any duties or responsibilities after you die. And what is there between this time after you were born and before you die is this body and mind. So your duties, your responsibilities, your work, everything belongs to the body and mind. And if you think you are one with your body and mind, then it becomes your work, your duties, your responsibilities, your headaches. But if you remind yourself, I'm not this body and mind, then it's not yours. Now, every night when you go to sleep, you are disconnected from your body. That's why if you have a headache, you might have some difficulty falling asleep. But if the body is tired enough, in spite of the headache or in spite of some physical pain, you're going to fall asleep sometime. The moment you fall asleep, you are disconnected from your body. And as long as and what does that disconnected really mean? That means you don't see that body as me. As long as you are asleep, none of the pain which the body had is your pain anymore, because you are not identified with the body anymore. Same thing with regard to the mind. When you are in deep sleep, when your mind also is not active, all the hopes and worries and aspirations that you have now, you are completely free from them in deep sleep. Because your worries, hopes, thoughts, ideas belong to the mind. Your physical actions belong to the body. They become your actions, they become your thoughts, your worries, only when you are identified with them. So if I can, in the waking state, when I'm fully conscious, remind myself that I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I can be free from all the limitations that the body and mind impose upon me. That doesn't mean I have to stop working. I can continue to work. In fact, I'll be able to do better work. I'll be able to do the same work in a shorter time and in a better way if I'm able to kind of step back a little from my own body and mind. and do it. That's what is meant by saying presiding over our actions. Next verse, 11. Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. The ignorant deride me who have taken a human form, not knowing my higher nature as the great Lord of beings. Now this verse can be understood in this way. First of all, the phenomenon of the avatara, the divine incarnation. How many people knew Krishna to be God come down as a human being? Very few people. Today we worship Krishna. Today those who worship Krishna have no doubt at all that he is God incarnate. But his contemporaries all didn't see him as God. Certainly not his uncle, that Mama, who tried to kill him. How can you kill God? And we see that not everyone saw him as God. And same is true with regard to all other incarnations as well. Not everyone regarded Jesus as the great incarnation. I mean, why would you crucify God? Same thing with Buddha. Same thing with Ramakrishna. Many people thought he was just a mad, crazy priest in a Kali temple. So it's not easy to recognize when God takes a human form. And that's what he said. The ignorant deride me who have taken a human form, not knowing my higher nature as the great Lord of being. So that's the first thing. That even when the divine takes a human form and lives and moves amongst us, it's not easy to recognize the divine. But seeing it in a more personal way, that's true with you and I as well. The divine, the Atman, has taken a human form. Well, the human form. Not only are we not able to recognize the divine in these incarnations, we are not able to recognize the divine within us. So this is the divine here, and every one of us see ourselves as a human being. We see ourselves as our human form has become more real to us than the presence of God in our own hearts. And that is the problem. This lack of vision, there's some kind of a veil has come before us because of which we are not able to see that reality. And that veil is called Maya. So I'll pause right now. Do you have any thoughts or ideas or questions about what we have said today?
About the cycles you mentioned, if they are coming again and again, what does the enlightenment mean? Are we beyond the cycle, or do we understand about the cycle, or we come every cycle?
Enlightenment means you are out of the cycle. It's like this. You are seeing one dream after another dream. Enlightenment means you wake up, no more dreams. So if you are happy with the cycles, if you are enjoying the dreams, don't get enlightened soon. I mean, that's the reality. Because it's like this. We say an enlightened being is a free person. Not really. Let me put it this way. There is an ancient Sanskrit verse which says that once you become enlightened, you are going to be free whether you like it or not. So it's like now you are enlightened, and then you have second thought like, oh no, I think I got enlightened too quickly. I'd like to remain. Sorry, that's too late. And so in that sense, you are not free. So that's why. So all these teachings, if you are having a good time in this world, don't get into it, because this is going to take you out. That's it.
Thank you.
But you see, having a good time in the world itself is the result of ignorance. It's a little bit like someone saying, hey, get out, the whole neighborhood is on fire. And you say, oh, no, I'm having a good time, I'm not going to do it. So that's what I'm. So whether it's possible to have a good time without being enlightened is a different question altogether. Yeah.
Swamiji, how do you maintain concentration on what you're doing in your work and being fully present and remembering God at the same time? Because when I try to do that, I feel like I get distracted from what I'm actually supposed to be doing, and I'm not fully present with the task that I'm working at.
Yeah. So I think a good way as a beginning practice would be that before you begin the work, you think of God, remember your spiritual ideal, and then don't worry whether you remember God while you're doing your work or not. Then be fully present at that work. When that work is finished, at the end of the work, you again think of God, offer all the results of that work at God's feet. So if you make this a practice to remember God at the beginning of any work and the end of every work, once you start doing it, once it becomes natural to you, you will see that even during the work, thought of God will automatically come. So first begin with remembering at the beginning and end. And don't worry about the middle. That will happen on its own.
Swamiji, you mentioned that somebody who has suffering in this life, or let us say who has a lot of good things happening to him in this life, it's all because of the karma he does, and one is and the consequence of that karma is in the future. But sometime, let us say in our common man's thinking, we say that, well, in past life we must have done, he must have done some good thing or some bad thing for which he is suffering in this life, or he is having something good in this life. Well, is that a myth then? That means the past life has really no consequence on the present life.
No, it's not a myth. It's like this. Every action will yield a result. And so whatever experiences we are having now, and in general, you can say, what specific result will be yielded by what specific action, no one knows. In general, we know if you have done something right or good, it will lead to a pleasant result. It will make you happy in some way. If you have done something not good, you will experience pain in some form. We just know the broad outline, okay? So now, whatever joy or pain I'm experiencing in life right now is a result of actions that I have done in the past. Now, if I'm experiencing some joy right now, let's say I just had chocolate ice cream, and I love chocolate ice cream, and I'm experiencing joy. Now, that joy has not come from past life. It just come from this particular ice cream that I ate. It's pretty obvious to make that connection. But sometimes it might happen that we might experience some wonderful thing or some terrible thing, and we are not able to mentally make a connection with anything that we have done in this life. If we are not able to make that connection, then we say, well, if not in this life, then it might have been some earlier life. And this is based on the principle that nothing happens without any reason. If we accept the theory that, well, anything can happen to anybody for no good reason, then you don't need the karma theory. But if we believe that there is such a thing as cause and effect, And if I'm not able to find the cause in the immediate past that I remember, then we say, well, then it must have happened. The cause must be so far back at some point that I don't remember. So it's a speculation, but it's a speculation based on the principle that there is such a thing as cause and effect in life. Yeah.
Somebody, just to extend on that, it could then be anybody's past actions, not just mine. If truly we are the spirit, and if I'm the spirit and there's one consciousness, then anybody's past actions can influence my karma.
No, because what provides the continuity from one life to the next? So it's not that this life a person dies, all that remains is only the spirit. No. What remains is the mind. Death is only of this gross body. The mind doesn't die. And the mind is the receptacle of our karma. So the mind that we have now is the mind we have had in all of our previous births. The physical body that we have is a physical body of only this birth. So the body is new. And therefore, since the mind holds the seeds of the karma and the samskara, we are not inheriting somebody else's karma. So that's pretty clear. So I experience the results of my own karma, not other people's karma.
So for all of you to, the last couple of questions, so then you would make, how would you sort of rationalize or, disease, and, somebody has cancer, is that because they did something bad, or, or is it a consequence of an action, or is that just destiny, or how do you?
Well, disease itself is not the consequence. The disease is, with some kind of, and for cancer, some cell is started misbehaving. I mean, that's the cause where cancer has occurred. So that's not the cause of cancer itself. Is not the result of karma. Cancer is the result of some anomaly within the body. Now, if that onset of cancer produces sorrow and suffering in that person, then that sorrow and suffering is the result of karma, not cancer itself. Is that clear? Yeah. So it's good to remember that, because sometimes people treat as if like some kind of handicaps or some kind of illness or disease itself as a result of karma, but that has nothing to do with karma. Well, you see, the body is a part of this material world. It has to follow the laws of the material world. So the cells have their own way of doing things. If they don't behave the way they are supposed to behave, they are going to create trouble. And that's really, and I'm just saying a layman's explanation of what cancer is. It's a pretty much more nuanced thing. But this is essentially how I see it. So disease itself is nothing to do with karma. Disease is the result, the malfunction of the body or the mind. But if it is accompanied by sorrow and pain, then that sorrow and pain is a result of karma. Or consequently, same thing with regard to joy and this thing. It's like being a CEO of a big flourishing company or being the president of a country itself is not the result of karma. Well, that's because you were a good campaigner, or just people loved you, or whatever. So holding some position somewhere is not the result of karma. But as a result of holding that position, if you experience great joy, then that joy is the result of karma. So sometimes some people could be a CEO of a big company and have a totally miserable life. Or some people could be a CEO of a company and be very happy. So being a CEO itself is not a good karma or bad karma, because it could go either way. Yeah.
Well, we are on the same subject. Now a great sage like Swami Vivekananda, passing away at the age of 39, To a common man like me, it looks like one of the biggest cruelty of destiny. How does one explain that? Because if such a saint or a sage would have lived some more years, he would have...
How many more years you want?
No, I'm not...
You are getting specific. How many more years would have been a good number of years?
No, what I meant is that he would have contributed so much to the humanity and to the mankind with his wisdom and with his preachings and all that. I mean, this one got really devoid of all that greatness from him. So sometimes, one is not in a position to explain this to oneself. And this.
Well, actually, I don't find it all that difficult. I mean, it's like first of all, there is no definite span of human life. I mean, if you see even life expectancy, over centuries it has changed. I mean, so several centuries ago it was pretty bad. Now with medical science advancing, people are living longer than they used to earlier. So there is no such thing. I mean, sometimes the scriptures in the Vedas, sometimes it says 100 years is a human lifespan. But and how many people live up to 100? That's another thing. And how many people are functional also to their full potency? As we grow older, our capacities also increase. So short life or a long life, again, is not necessarily the result of good or bad karma. If someone lives for a short time, that's not necessarily bad karma. So and that's a whole different subject, that the body will live as long as it has to work out the karma. Once the karma is finished, the body will go. Some babies die soon after birth. That's even much shorter span of life. So I don't see it so much as cruelty. In fact, I see that what Vivekananda accomplished in that short time, we are not able to digest what he has given us in that short span of life. If he had lived longer, we'd have had like 20 volumes of his complete works. How many people read his complete works right now? So I don't think necessarily that just extending his life by a few years would have made too big a difference. Who knows? I mean, what if scenarios can go either way? There is a saying in the Mahabharata which says, Muhurtam jvalitam shreyo natu dhuma itam chiram. It means it's better to flame forth for an instant than to smoke away for ages. And so it's good to have a very productive life. Do something really good to benefit humanity, even if you live for, say, 30 years, than to live for 110 years and kind of gradually die. So Mahabharata says it's not the length of life that matters, but what is accomplished in the short life. So there are different perspectives on that one. Yeah, Akash.
With respect to the soul and the question that was brought up about we're all one consciousness. So with the animal kingdom, so do you think there is a trans-species migration of so can you, let's say, in your next life be born as not as a human species, but
of course, yeah.
So there's so it's not necessarily specific.
Oh no, not at all.
So
you can be anyone. You can be a tree.
You could be a tree.
Anything. Well, that's how.
The tree also has a mind then.
Yeah, but maybe very dormant. Who knows? We don't know. I mean, only if I can get inside a tree's mind, I would know what the tree is thinking. But the Gita, the Upanishad, all our talk is our human explanation of the world that we see around us. It's how we human beings see animals or see trees. We don't know how animals see us, or we don't know how trees see us. And I guess it's just a human nature. So since it's our explanation, a human explanation of the world, we put ourselves higher up on the evolutionary ladder. So it's like, well, the animals and birds are like lower and we are higher. I mean, which is fine, it makes us feel good that we are evolved beings. But I wouldn't kind of place my whole philosophy on that, because it's still a human perspective. We don't know what a dog is thinking or a cat is thinking. Swami Vivekananda says in his Jnana Yoga lectures, he says, if a cat were to think of God, it will be like some one big, huge, infinite cat who is loving and kind. A cat mind will think of God in cat terms, just like a human mind is thinking of God in human terms. So that's just the way our mind is constituted to thinking. Very fascinating subject. So we'll continue this discussion when we meet next Wednesday. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. On Sunday, we'll have a guest speaker, Professor Jeffrey Long of Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania. I've spoken here before. A few years ago, we had him here for Krishna Festival. So he will speak on Our Mother who art in heaven. It's a day, next Sunday is the Falaharini Kali Puja. And so it's a very good topic. So we'll reflect on that topic on Sunday. Next Wednesday, we'll continue with the study of the Gita at 7:30. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Aarti and meditation will also continue as usual at 6 o'clock. So you're welcome for all of these programs. One other small announcement. You're of course aware of the tremendous tragedy that has occurred in Nepal about the earthquake. Several thousand people are no more, and then they're having this series of tremors even afterwards. So the Vedanta Center in Kathmandu has begun a relief work in a massive scale. And if you would like to contribute for the relief work that the Ramakrishna Order is doing, feel free to contribute. You can either pay by check or do it online. And then either in the memo or in a separate email, you can let me know that amount is meant for the Kathmandu, the Nepal earthquake relief. Just this morning, I wired them a big amount, and I will continue to do that as and when more contributions come in. So please keep that in mind and let your friends know that in case they would like to contribute, they can do so. I mean, there are many organizations doing work there, so feel free to contribute to any of those organizations, but it will be good that in some way we are able to help our suffering brothers and sisters in that part of the world. So we'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Peace, peace, peace be unto all.